let's discuss the ICJ ruling because I wanted to give some additional context to it. And the gist of it is this, okay? It's about the West Bank. It also talks about Gaza, but it clarifies an issue, well, that doesn't really need clarification because the whole world knows that West Bank is illegally occupied, but let's go through it. So the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, has ruled that Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful and should come to an end as rapidly as possible. Nawaf Salam, president of the ICJ in The Hague, read out the non-binding advisory opinion issued by the 15-judge panel on Israel's occupation. The judges pointed to a wide list of policies, including the building and expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, use of the area's natural resources, the annexation and imposition of permanent control over lands, and discriminatory policies against Palestinians, all of which it said violated international law. The court said Israel has no right to sovereignty over the territories, is violating international laws against acquiring territory by force, and impeding Palestinians' right to self-determination. Another important point is that other countries are obliged not to render aid or assistance in maintaining Israel's presence in the territory. Okay? Israel has to end settlement construction immediately, and all the existing settlements must be removed. So, look, I'll tell you very frankly, when the Israelis invaded Jerusalem, and they took this is in '67, they took over the Syrian Golan Heights, West Bank, Jerusalem, and so on, which they still occupy to this day. The UN Security Council, which does issue binding resolutions, you have to follow them. If you're a UN member, what the UN Security Council says, you follow. It's the law. Otherwise, leave the UN. But they issued Resolution 242, unanimously passed. Every single member voted for it, including the Americans. And it said very clearly, although I'll tell you in a second why it was not clear, apparently, that the Israelis have to get out. They have to get out of all the occupied territories. Do you notice? They said occupied territories. They didn't say West Bank, East Jerusalem, Golan Heights. They said occupied territories on purpose, okay? So you can guess why they did that, but here's the I'll tell you in a second, but look at the resolution, okay? Passed unanimously. No votes against, no abstentions, everyone in agreement. Now, this was a bit of, they were basically diluting and the names of the areas on purpose so that Israel can then go say, well, what's the occupied territories? This is Israel. And of course, who did that? The UK and the US made that change. So these are lawyer games, legal games that they play, and this is how they corrupt the United Nations. But even then, I mean, it's very clear that they're illegally occupied because even afterwards, the Israelis annexed them illegally in 80 and 81. And also the UN Security Council told them, you can't annex this because it doesn't belong to you. Your laws and your, sovereignty in East Jerusalem, in the West Bank, in the Golan Heights are null and void. Those are the exact words, null and void, completely illegal and irrelevant. So there are multiple resolutions, right? That's my point. That's what I'm trying to get across. There are multiple resolutions that are legally binding, passed decades ago, about this topic, which the Israelis do not respect. They're about the occupation, about the annexation, all of it, okay? And so now having the ICJ rule on that, I mean, it's nothing new. I think for some people who haven't been following Palestine, or maybe who are new to this, it seems like a big thing. And don't get me wrong, having Israel tried in an international court, in the world court, for what it's doing is certainly unprecedented. But the problem is that even when you have a legally binding resolution, they just don't respect it. They don't follow it. That's the problem. And let me just go back to what they're saying here, because they're also saying other countries that support the settlements and support Israel in the West Bank, will be in violation of international law. Obviously, this is why you see a lot of successful BDS attempts, for example, to get companies in the West to pull out and close their shops, close their production lines, and stop selling their goods and services inside of the West Bank, which is, I mean, it's a half measure, because if you're just going to sell them, in For example, in Tel Aviv, which they think is Israel. I mean, you're still benefiting Israel. You're not really boycotting Israel. You're just covering your ass in case something like this happens with the ICJ. Anyway, better than nothing, I suppose. But again, I'm not knocking BDS by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that businesses that still, if you still do business with Israel, but you just, you don't do it in the West Bank, you're still helping Israel. So in any case, look at this contrast, how the judge is reading out this ruling, and look at the behavior of the Israelis. These happen in the same week, okay? Actually a day apart. Yeah, just a day apart. Look at this.
Hayat! 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 Hayat!
The state of Israel is under an obligation to cease immediately all new settlement activities and to evacuate all settlers from the occupied Palestinian territory.
So that is what life looks like under Israeli occupation. Okay, so just to be clear, you might be looking at this and thinking, well, what's going on? Who is hitting who? So Israeli settlers, who are soldiers because they all have to do military service, but in this particular case, they're not wearing their military fatigues. Whatever, maybe they finished their service or whatever. Who knows? But they're basically walking around in the West Bank, doing pogroms, doing lynchings. This is the equivalent of what the Ku Klux Klan would do to black African Americans, or what actually ironically would happen to Jews in Europe when they were persecuted. And now they're taking it out on the people who gave them refuge. Which, I mean, talk about betrayal. So Palestinians are in their homes, and Israeli settlers come around with guns, with sticks, doesn't matter. And behind them, you'll often see the Israeli army. And there's an Israeli soldier right there. You see him? So what does the Israeli soldier do? Let's take a look.
To cease immediately all new settlement activities and to evacuate all settlers from the occupied.
The Israeli soldier is there, of course, to protect the settlers. So I'm not joking. This is not an exaggeration at all. It is just the truth. The Israeli soldier is there to defend the Jewish settler. Even if the Jewish settler commits murder, he won't even be arrested. He won't even be arrested. So you're a Jewish settler. You can just beat Palestinians, throw a Molotov cocktail, do whatever you want. And if the Palestinians fight back, the Israeli soldier will shoot them for you. This sounds dystopian because it is dystopian. There are a million. I don't even have time, and I'm not even going to show you all of the videos of this because I've already done that, and it's happened so often. I mean, to debate this would be futile. That is what occupation is like in the West Bank. All right, and this is in the West Bank. There's no Hamas. So what they did with the Oslo Accords, and this is why, many people now think it was a failure, and at the time Syria was against it, is because they carved up the West Bank into like tiny cantons, and like it looks like Swiss cheese, literally like Swiss cheese. So you have Palestinian villages surrounded by Israeli settlements. And then these pogroms happen on a daily basis. And I mean, it's completely out of hand, right? Completely out of hand. So the thing is, the ICJ is telling all these settlers, you have to pack up and go, ship out. Okay, I'll pull up a map, by the way, since I'm always looking for an excuse to do that. Yeah, look, so you have about, 500,000, 800,000 Israeli settlers living in the West Bank illegally, every single one. So this is what they did to the place, and this is what the Israelis want. And they here, you see that how it's carved up into tiny areas, yeah. So the Israelis did this on purpose, and you have the planners who say this on camera, that they designed it in a way that there can never be a Palestinian state because there are Israeli settlements all over. So it's just like physically, logically, practically, logistically impossible to have a country. Yeah, because they did it in that way on purpose. Okay, it's very sick. It's very twisted, and you just in any case, the ICJ is saying all of these people who live here, every Israeli in the West Bank, this whole area, okay, so forget the colors for a second, all of them have to go. All of them. And again, we didn't need the ICJ to tell us that because the UN Security Council already, passed that as a resolution multiple times. So we know what the law is, and we know what the UN says, but just to reinforce that, we have the ICJ. And do you think the Israelis are going to listen? No. So now the question is, okay, what can we do about it? Because the Palestinians recognized Israel. They keep saying, oh, they don't want to recognize the right of the Jewish state. No, that's not true. They signed the Oslo Accords. They literally, officially recognized Israel. So they did that. They engaged in diplomacy. They signed accords. They even gave land to Israel just by recognizing it. They signed half the land away, which is quite generous, if you ask me. And then they also tried, the ICC, the ICJ. They've tried every legal avenue that you can think of, every single one. The Palestinians have tried it. They've tried literally every diplomatic and peaceful, form of protest. BDS as well. You can add that to the list. Just marching, add it to the list. It doesn't work, and it's not that it doesn't work. It's just usually you don't respond to that with mass violence. The Israelis do. That's why it doesn't work, right? So they don't respect democratic, diplomatic, and peaceful forms of conflict resolution. They don't respect them. And then the problem is if you try to oppose them militarily, they call you terrorist. Even if you go to FIFA, remember we were talking about FIFA earlier, just to complain to FIFA that your football players are being massacred by Israel and you want Israel to be kicked out like Russia was, the foreign minister says you're a terrorist, and they say they want to jail you. So you're not dealing with rational actors here, I'm afraid. And so the point here that I want I've said this before, but I'll repeat it. Just give me 1 second. Because it's very important what they're saying in the ruling. I know that, they're reiterating some things, but nevertheless. So this is quite eloquently put, and I'll just read it out to you. The ICJ did not just rule that the West Bank is a legally occupied territory, but also Gaza. Also Gaza. As the genocidal Israeli regime always retained de facto control over it. In other words, the ICJ reaffirmed that October 7 was a legitimate act of self-defense against a genocidal occupier. Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself, and that is legally what it says. Because remember, if you're illegally occupied, you have the right to resist. You may not like it, but, well, who cares what you like? I mean, I don't understand why Americans and Israelis go to other people's countries and then get mad when they're shot at. You're not a victim. You invaded their country with tanks and bombs. Of course you're going to get shot at. I mean, this is ridiculous. If someone tried to invade the United States, they would blow them out of the water, and then no one would question that the rationale behind that. But apparently, it's preposterous to defend yourself against Zionists and Americans. How dare you? So this is another important point in this ruling. You understand? It's not just that they're telling all the settlers to get out, clearly, in 2024, but also about Gaza. Israelis have this propaganda that, Israel doesn't occupy Gaza anymore because it left in 2005, right? So this is a point that you'll hear Israelis trying to make to say that they don't occupy it. They have nothing to do with it. Well, I'm sorry, but occupation is not only with foot soldiers. You can also occupy something by besieging it. Yes? Not to mention that there are foot soldiers around surrounding Gaza. So you cannot leave by land. You cannot leave by air because Israel bombed their airport. Of course. And you cannot leave by sea because you are cordoned in and trapped. Even the fish is overfished. To the point that, you understand, like, it's that bad. So you're trapped. It's a concentration camp, albeit in a different sense. And the point is that that's an occupation. The Israelis think they're very clever. That, oh well, you know, we're not living there. I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. No rational person accepts your definition. No court accepts your definition. So again, we come back to the point that the resistance is legitimate. As a matter of fact, the French in World War II, just to give you an example, some of them had to flee to England. You had people from Poland who fled to England to escape Nazi persecution. They regrouped. Some of them joined the RAF. Some of them joined other regiments. And then they fought the Nazis. They fought the Nazis from, you know, a different area. So my point here is that the analogy I'm trying to make is just because some Palestinians are in Gaza, they were forced there after being kicked out of their homes. Remember, 70% of them. Just because they're in Gaza doesn't mean they can't engage in resistance for Jerusalem. That's also their country. Their original homes are outside of Gaza. So, you know, this idea that, oh, well, you know, they have to be in the same area where IDF troops are located for it to count as an occupation. Okay, they're going to where you are occupying their land and confronting you. If you're unhappy with fighting inside of Gaza, well, okay, and you are occupying the West Bank, yes? You are occupying Jerusalem. Will you agree to that? I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, it's like playing. It's a game of cat and mouse with the Israelis. They want to grind, you know, your intellectual process to a halt and waste your time with dumb, nonsensical arguments. There is no point arguing with a Zionist. The only thing to be said is fuck off out of Palestine. You have a first passport. Your parents, your grandparents came from Morocco, from Ukraine. Go. You're not an immigrant. You're a colonizer, which is completely different. Okay? If you want to go to a country, you emigrate legally. You don't come with machine guns and then say your ancestors lived here 3,000 years ago. That is not a fucking legal argument to take land. It just isn't. Sorry. Goodbye. And not only that, the Geneva Convention says that, you know, if you pull up, you'll get the smoke. I mean, come on. You know, this is not even a thing about legality necessarily. It's such an instinctive thing to defend yourself, right? It's not even confined to humans. All living beings have the instinct to defend themselves. And man, I mean, the Palestinians, with what Israel has done to them, are the most patient and lenient people in history. Truly. I mean, it is inconceivable that any one of us, even these people who are pro-Israel, could live a week, you know, a day under Israeli occupation and not resist. It's inconceivable. These people are either ignorant or lying or both, and frankly, I don't care. You know, we're not going to negotiate or debate, you know, the right of Palestinians and Arabs to take back their land. It's not up for debate. You're going, and that's it. End of story. You know, and this idea that, well, you know, some Israelis were born in the West Bank and this is their home, and you know, what will they do? I'm sorry, it's not our responsibility to figure out what you will do. You let Palestinians live for a century without statehood and threw them in ghettos. So figure your shit out by yourself. Unbelievable. You know, they want the victims to figure out logistical and travel solutions for them after what they did. I mean, the nerve of these people. It's unbelievable, truly. So in any case, the problem is that, you know, the ICJ could issue any ruling and the Israelis won't apply it. And the same goes for the United Nations Security Council. I mean, we're dealing with people who loathe, who despise, who, you know, constantly subvert and undermine the United Nations as an organization. how can you expect someone or an entity that has murdered more UN peacekeepers and staff members than anyone else to respect what the UN says? The only reason the Israelis are in the UN is because they want the pretense of being a country. That's the only purpose that it serves. It's a PR move. They just want to look like they're a real country. That's it. That's all it is. Okay? Nothing more. They don't care about what the UN Charter says. They don't. I mean, the guy literally shredded it and then accused other people of shredding it. I mean, I could have sworn I saw a new one from the Israeli ambassador. I'll see if I can find it afterwards. But really, just, we're talking about people that are irrational and very, 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 contemptuous to the UN. The problem also is that in the West Bank, the water is cut off for Palestinians. So it's not just that they come to your house and they beat you. They will even cut off your water. I mean, really, I could sit here all night and we still wouldn't finish with what they do. This is a woman, an activist who came to the West Bank, and look what an Israeli settler did to her. I mean, okay, actually, I'm not going to show you because it's quite bad, but you've all seen the video where, she gets elbowed. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. And they talk about women's rights in Iran. Burning cars, burning houses, you name it. Uprooting olive trees. This is another thing which I find outrageous. This is a video from April 13th, so I mean, this is about 2-3 months old. This is what Israeli settlers did to olive trees that belong to Palestinians. Okay, look at this.
قالوا لكم تعين حماس تحرجوا، تعين القسام تحرجوا، رايحين يصلوا لكم لدوركم، ولا حدا تحرج، خليكم نايمين، ضبوا سلاحكم، خبوه للطواش، خبوه. احنا مناش ما حدا راضي يطلع شيء، كلهم خايفين، كل واحد خايف. عشو خايف؟ بكره جايك الدور، بكره جايكم الدور، واحد لباب داركم. اي وصلونا هلا باب الدار وحركوا الدار والناس تتفرج. عشو بتتفرجوا؟ ولكم عشو بتتفرجوا؟ ولكم الحمد لله، اقول لك الحمد لله طلعت شويه احجار هنا، شويه احجار، واللي من اللي بضربوهن بضرب عليهم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، شاركنا في طوفان الاقصى.
To uproot an olive tree, to burn olive trees, is a very offensive and vile thing to do, because it's a symbol of Palestine. First of all, the best olive oil in the world comes from Palestine, and Palestinians, they tend to these trees, from one generation to the next. You understand? These trees, some of them are thousands of years old. Not all of them, but you find literally olive trees that are thousands of years old in Palestine. And you have people that have tended to grows their whole life, and then suddenly some person from Europe who says they are chosen by God just rips it and uproots it and burns it in front of them, and then beats them and has police and army come and restrain them. I mean, what do you want me to say? How much do you expect Palestinians to take? This is a very, this is an image that really stuck with me. And it's so emblematic of the relationship between Palestinians and the land, and specifically the olive trees. Do you see how that woman is, she's really hanging on for dear life with that tree? I mean, it's so symbolic, really powerful image, really powerful image. So this is, by the way, this is a great piece from Al Jazeera. They go through, its cultural importance and what Israelis do. Very, 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 very upsetting to see this, and that shows you that Israelis do not come from this land. If you care about this land, you don't burn it. Okay? I mean, let me be clear. If you're trying to liberate yourself and you accidentally set something on fire, that's completely different. But in this case, where you are going up to the trees and lighting them, this is sick. This is completely sick. And it's not. This is not something that just happened once. Very vulgar. The idea is to terrify you, literally to terrify you and terrorize you into leaving so that they take the land. This is the idea. This is why in the Nakba, you had Israelis committing the most, unspeakable acts against Palestinian women, against, all villagers they came across, because they knew that back then, you didn't have, they weren't in the age of social media, but just also how the society is, people spread news through word of mouth. And when people heard what was coming, what these, Zionist militias were doing, these militias became the IDF, by the way. They ran away. They literally fled their homes because they were so scared, and that was the whole point behind it. And make no mistake, it was not unfounded. And the idea that you can take someone's house because they're not in the house. I mean, this is outrageous. If someone leaves their house for 500 years and wants to come back, it's none of your business. It's their property. They'll come up with all sorts of excuses to justify this. It's outrageous. So there are so many crimes that go on in the West Bank on a daily basis. At the crimes committed against the land, against the Palestinians, against their culture by Israelis, that it's untenable. I mean, some people argue, I don't find it, I don't see the point of comparing, but just to kind of underscore how bad it is. Some people sometimes say that living in the West Bank is worse than in Gaza because you're, humiliated, you're subdued, you are patted down, put through checkpoints and barriers and searched and treated like crap by these soldiers, by this occupation, and by its settlers on a daily basis. Gaza it's still occupied, but it's occupied in the form of a siege, right? When you surround a city and cut off the food and control it through that way, in that manner. So it's also de facto occupied, but in a different way. But you don't have checkpoints the way you do in the West Bank. You used to in Gaza until 2005. So they just switched, they left Gaza alone for 1 year and then just put it under siege. It's been under siege ever since. And then they bomb, the hell out of it every 2 years and then claim that, Hamas. Okay. So, life is very difficult in the West Bank. And the photo I wanted to show you, this is what happens to international activists who come and, try to defend Palestinians. The injuries that Israelis inflict on them, it's unbelievable. Once again, disproportionate, vulgar violence. And, how can you do diplomacy with people like that? I just don't understand that they don't want to engage in good faith. For them, diplomacy is a sign of weakness. Oh, let's waste time. In any case, without going off on too many tangents, I do think it is important, nevertheless, to tie these whole aspects in. And remember also the raid on October 7 that the Israelis complain about is something they do all the time. They do it almost every week in the West Bank. They do it. Look, I'll show you on the map here. You see Ramallah, for example, they'll go in and then, wait, I wanted to pull up Google Maps, actually be better. But, they're going to Jenin and to Nablus. They'll go and do special raids also where they send like, a hit squad. There's a case where they shot 3 men in a car last year, just point blank in broad daylight. And they always pretend that they're civilians. The Israelis literally dress up like a disguise, a costume as civilians, which is amazing because they constantly accuse Palestinians of doing that. Israelis always do that. They'll dress up as doctors, as nurses. They'll get vans and make them look like they're civilian vans, and you have soldiers hiding inside. There's a reason everything they say is actually a confession. It's called projection. And so when the problem here is that despite all of these hardships that you have on a daily basis in the West Bank, even the World Court cannot enforce anything, and the UN Security Council, which is the which issues legally binding documents. They don't care. They do not respect it. It's what do you do? What do you do in this case? What do you do in this case? You know, I genuinely think that at this point there's no chance of any reconciliation. I'll come back to that in a second. But here, one moment. This was from the same people that were attacked in this video. Let me find that interview they did. So, I mean, if you ask me, and most sane people or rational people, the Israelis that are coming up to these houses, look at them holding those batons and sticks. What is wrong with you that you get up in the morning and you pick up a stick and walk out and and beat people that you don't even know for no reason? What is wrong with you? These are mobs. These are hooligans. These are thugs. These are, it's a lynch mob. It's a lynch mob. And I think it's really important to use language precisely because the Israelis, they try to, and the media will help them with this, they try to dilute things. No. On the contrary, we want to just tell the truth. It's not an exaggeration. It's just the truth. Here, this is... Yeah, so look at these activists. These are people that were attacked yesterday in the West Bank by Israeli settlers, southeast of Nablus in Qusra. Okay.
طبعا الإصابات كانت طفيفة إلى يعني متوسطة جراء اعتداء المستوطنين الذين قاموا بالاعتداء على حركة التضامن الدولي الذين كانوا متواجدين مع الأهالي في بلدة قصرى الذين حاولوا الوصول لأراضيهم هذا اليوم وحراسة أراضيهم وأيضا زراعتها، ولكن المستوطنين قاموا بالهجوم عليهم بالهروات بالعصي بالحديد، ضربوهم على كل أنحاء أجسامهم وملاحقتهم وشتمهم بطريقة بذيئة أمام مرأى وجيش الاحتلال الذي كان يتواجد في المنطقة. تم نقل 4 إصابات إلى مستشفى رفيدة، تم تقديم العلاج لهم في مستوصف قصرى، ومن ثم تم نقلهم من خلال الهلال الأحمر وإسعاف قريوت الذين كانوا متواجدين في المنطقة. هذه الهمجية هي عملية منظمة وممنهجة من قبل المستوطنين الذين يعتدون على المواطنين ويحاولون أيضا إطلاق الرصاص عليهم. هذا اليوم كان اختصارا لإطلاق الرصاص من قبل المستوطنين لأنهم يعلمون أن هؤلاء أجانب وهؤلاء دوليين، حاولوا تلقينهم يعني ضربات متعددة ليمنعوهم من التواجد مع الأهالي في هذه المنطقة.
Amazing, right? Amazing. You'll recall also that when it comes to Rachel Corrie, an American girl, she went to the West. No, sorry, that was Gaza actually. But I think my point is well taken. That even as a foreign citizen, if you're American or British or whatever, countries that arm Israel and give it diplomatic cover, they'll still kill you. If you get in their way, they'll murder you. And for over the tiniest things, I mean, they crushed her with a bulldozer. I mean, like crushing someone with a bulldozer. It's unbelievable. I just don't understand why they do these things. And it's interesting because if they do that to foreigners who help them, what do you think they're doing to Palestinians who have no way to fight or defend themselves or any recourse, right? You understand? Let me explain something to you, because I interviewed a guy who lives in this area in the West Bank. This happened in Masafer Yatta. Okay, now Masafer Yatta, look at how evil the Israelis are. They told the Palestinians living there that they now live in a military training zone, just like that, from one day to the next, and that they have to leave. How nice, right? So they just decide, you have to leave. It's a military training zone. And this is ethnic cleansing. Make no mistake, it's ethnic cleansing. And you know, of course, they're lying about it being a military training zone. They pretend to train there just to make it look like their order is real. It's so ridiculous, you know. And then this is why they let the settlers behave like this, because they need pogroms and lynch mobs and thug violence and mobs to help them ethnically cleanse the area. You understand? I mean, let me just ask you one question. Logically, if this is really an area for, you know, the military to train, why are settlers walking around? How can you enter a military area as a civilian, right? So-called civilian. We know they're all reservists, but you know what I mean? Even if you're a reservist, if you're not in uniform and on duty, you can't go in. You're not, you know, you don't have permission. Why are they walking around? Why is it okay for them to start, you know, lynching people? And let's say it really is a military training area. How does that give you the right to lynch people? I mean, like no matter how you look at this, the Israelis, you know, their laws are just they're illegal under international law. And then even if you would accept the premise that Israel has sovereignty there, it's lying in its own orders. Yeah. So you know, no matter how you look at it, it's corrupt. And again, I'll remind you, the ICJ ruled that, I'm just pulling this up on the map to show you, and I also want to show you the interview I did with this guy. 1 second. Isn't it lovely when you try to find a Palestinian village or town on Google and you can't because they've erased the name and made it Israeli? How lovely. This is in the West Bank, okay? So this is supposed to be Palestine. How can you go into Palestine, a foreign country, and then claim this is a military training zone? Remember, the Palestinians recognize Israel, and the deal was that they get their own state within 5 years, right? Supposedly, that the Israelis would help them and basically facilitate it. It was all a lie. But the point is, even if you accept Israel, okay, even if you accept that this all of this here, Tel Aviv, you know, Jerusalem, it's all Israel. Even if you accept this, how can you say that the West Bank is also Israel? And how can you accept that Israel goes in there and builds a military training area? How can you accept that Israel goes in and raids Nablus and raids Jenin? Isn't that what Hamas, you know, you decried Hamas for on October 7? For going in, raiding, kidnapping, and killing, right? Isn't that a war crime according to you? Why do you do it every week? Literally every week. There are 9,000 prisoners, hostages, just since October 7. And the whole point of October 7 was because you had thousands already held as hostages in prison, and many of them were taken in these raids. Okay? I mean, we're going down a rabbit hole. I swear to God, you have to... We're going down a rabbit hole. You can't talk about one thing without, you know, going to the next. But going, again, just to stay focused. How are these settlers in this video going into a foreign country, what is officially recognized as Palestine, and beating people up? And there's a soldier with them too, an armed soldier. What is this, an invasion? What are you doing there? This is why the Israelis, you can't appease them, because you give them everything. You recognize them, you give them legitimacy, you accept to lay down your arms. Remember, that was part of the agreement. It was not just like, oh, okay, you know, you get this half, and it's not half, it's actually more than 50%, and we get this. It was, we stopped resisting. That was what the Israelis wanted. They wanted to kneecap the PLO. They wanted to bring it to heel. No more armed resistance, right? Because they've been framing them as terrorists and terrorists. And then finally the PLO said, fine, we'll stop. What did they get? They got this. This is what you get for appeasing Israelis. They will beat you, kill you, come into your home, you know, do all sorts of crimes to you. And the idea that you would accept to give someone, you know, 56% of your country, I mean, okay, never mind, let's say 1%, never mind 56, is outrageous. So you see, this ICJ order, it does carry weight. Obviously, it's the highest, you know, court, and it's supposed to be respected because remember, the ICC, many countries are not a party to the Rome Statute. So when it comes to the ICJ, we have a little bit more wiggle room just because the Americans and Israelis have set precedents where they have to listen to the court. They don't do it, but legally they have to. And my point here is just that Palestinians have done everything. They tried diplomacy. They're trying all the top world courts. They're trying every legal avenue that they can. And they keep on getting beaten in their houses, in their homes. They keep getting humiliated, and they keep dying and being, even filmed while it's happening, and the world just doesn't care. So that's an indictment of the planet, to be honest. I mean, really, this is like, I think we've all seen enough oppression of Palestinians. We've had it up to here. I don't understand how anyone else can tolerate that. But make no mistake. The Israelis, even if you accept Israel, they're not allowed to be in East Jerusalem. They're not allowed to be in the West Bank. They don't care. And coming back to the issue of occupation, the Geneva Convention is a guide for how to run an occupation. But an occupation is meant to be temporary. It says it in the Geneva Convention. As a matter of fact, if you make it permanent, you're violating the Geneva Convention. That's also in the Geneva Convention. So everything Israel does, which it claims it has the right to do, it doesn't, because it has done it so long and normalized it that it's illegal. All right. And that includes, putting civilians on trial in military courts. I mean, this is the definition of a police state. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, civilians, put in military courts since 67. Barbaric. And then, they want to turn around and say, oh, look, Syria is undemocratic. Oh, look, Iran is undemocratic. Have you looked at yourselves? So, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. And it's good we have the ruling, because in the future, whenever someone wants to tell you Hamas are terrorists, the PLO, Fatah wing, which is, it's split in Gaza, or the PFLP, or PIJ, or the Lion's Den, that they're terrorists, you can just shove an ICJ order in their face and tell them shut up. To cut a long story short, all right? Just one last note on the ICJ. Richie Torres says the International Court of Justice came out with an advisory opinion asserting the illegality of a Jewish sovereign presence in the Jewish quarter of the Old City, the Western Wall, and the Temple Mount, the holiest sites in Judaism. No, that's not what it says, actually. An ICJ that definitively prejudges Jewish sovereignty over these Jewish sites to be illegitimate outside the context of bilateral negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians is exposing its own illegitimacy. You know people who talk without saying anything? Yeah, that's this guy. Shut the fuck up, please. Look, the Israelis, when they hatched their plan to carve up Palestine without including Palestinians in the negotiation, like you're saying, agreed not to take Jerusalem, and they agreed that that would be a separate body. So you're an idiot. So he says afterwards that it is acting not legally but politically. Wow. It is engaged not in law but in lawfare. Oh wow. When it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, there's no dispute. There are Israelis invading Palestinians in their homes. That's not a dispute. We don't say that Nazi Germany had a dispute with Polish people. The Nazi-Polish dispute. Can you imagine someone saying that? Or I don't know, the Nazi I don't know, pick whatever you want. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. There's no dispute here. There is an occupation. So I mean, you can call it a dispute, but that's a bit of So anyway, he says, when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, there has been nothing just about the International Court of Justice. Its judgments against Israel have been neither judicial nor judicious. Wow, I mean, you really got him with that one, putting all those puns in there. Wow, the wordplay is marvelous. Yeah. you know, I agree that I agree that it's political because they don't ever enforce their orders and make, you know, they make it hard for Palestinians to get justice. So which is kind of funny because, you know, the Israelis, for them it's like 100% obedience, and if you disobey by 0.5%, that's it, you lost your legitimacy. Really, that's how they shut people up. You know, it's like they want to keep them in line with fear. And this is, I mean, no one is afraid of Richie Torres, but you know, the language is very, very similar. You can tell, I don't know, to me this sounds like an Israeli wrote it. But Richie Torres considers himself an Israeli. He's a funny character. I remember when he won his seat. I remember when he won his seat in Congress. You know, first thing I see is, oh, Israel is the gay capital of the Middle East. And he's, you know, trying to basically appeal to Westerners or, you know, progressives by saying that, you know, look how good Israel is and look how savage everybody around Israel is. Like, you know, it's this racist trope that Israelis are somehow more advanced, you know, in their thinking and they're more open and modern. Complete rubbish. You can't get married if you're gay in Israel. If you're gay and Palestinian, they will actually blackmail you for intelligence. You know, which is, I mean, if you don't find that homophobic, I don't know what to tell you. So no, Israel is not the gay capital of the Middle East. It is the capital of occupation and imperialism in the Middle East. That's what it is. And trying to, you know, sell Zionism by pinkwashing it is just ridiculous. Please, I mean, this, you know, just stop. And it's incredible that people like this are elected to Congress. I mean, it's such an indictment of Congress people in America. They have no clue what they're talking about. Really, really, it's awful. Really awful. Anyway, I just thought we could look at it because it's so funny. And, you know, this thing with Jewish sovereign presence. What is a Jewish sovereign presence? Explain that to me, please. What is Jewish sovereignty? Is that about, you know, Jews from Syria, Jews from Ukraine? What does that mean, Jewish sovereignty? What does that mean? No one is saying that you can't have a Jewish quarter in the Old Sea. What nonsense. The irony is that Israeli settlers are trying to destroy the Armenian quarter. Yeah. They're literally saying we are in danger. This is the biggest threat we face since, you know, since 1600 years, in, you know, in the whole period that we've existed. That's how bad it is. And you remember, a lot of people invaded Jerusalem. So, yeah, this is so ridiculous, trying to make it about religion. No one is bringing in religion. Why do you talk about this? Prejudges Jewish... I mean, it's just so ridiculous. I really, really nuts. And then the best part is outside the context of bilateral negotiations. What bilateral negotiations? Who is negotiating? The Palestinians being murdered by Israelis. There's everything but talking going on, yeah? So it's basically like, please stop trying to, you know, apply the law. Just let us, you know, go waste time with the Palestinians and promise them some things that we won't do. You know, delay tactic. Again, YouTube demonetized my channel because I'm not allowed to say naughty things about Israel. You know, telling the truth is forbidden. So if you are able to donate a few dollars on PayPal or on a monthly basis on Patreon, please consider doing it because it would really help me continue my journalism and support independent media. So I'd be very grateful. And the links are in the description and also in the chat. Thank you guys very much again for all your donations and all your kind comments. I appreciate it very much.